You already have an Emerald Tree Boa, and that's awesome. These gorgeous tree-dwelling snakes are as fascinating as they are challenging to care for. If you found yourself in the world of exotic pet ownership with one of these beautiful green serpents, you're probably learning that they need some very specific care to thrive. But don't worry, I'm here to walk you through everything you need to know to keep your Emerald Tree Boa happy, healthy, and living its best life in your care. Here's a little something to get you thinking. Did you know in the wild the Emerald Tree Boa spends most of its life high up in the trees, but there's one surprising food source that makes up the bulk of its diet? Stick around and we'll reveal what it is by the end of this video. First, let's talk about the enclosure. You've probably already realized that a traditional snake tank just won't cut it for an Emerald Tree Boa. They're climbers by nature, so you need a tall vertical enclosure that mimics the treetops where they spend most of their time. Make sure to include plenty of branches, vines, and horizontal surfaces for them to slither along. Don't forget to add hiding spots. Your boa will need them. These snakes love to retreat into tight, secure spots to feel safe. If you haven't already, try to make the space as natural as possible. The more places they have to climb and hide, the happier they'll be. Think of it like building a jungle gym for your snake, minus the slide, of course. Now let's get into the trickier part, humidity. If you've been struggling with humidity levels, you're not alone. These snakes thrive in high humidity, between 70 to 90% to be exact. If you've been dealing with dry air, you'll want to invest in a good misting system or a humidity gauge to monitor things closely. For temperature, keep it between 78 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. It might take some experimenting with your setup to get this just right, but it's worth it. At night, you can let the temperature dip slightly, but make sure it doesn't drop too low. Pro tip: misting can also help with humidity, but make sure your boa's hide stays dry to avoid any moisture buildup that could lead to health issues like skin shedding problems. By now, you probably already know that Emerald Tree Boas are not your average snake when it comes to food. Keep watching and we will reveal this unique food they eat in the wild. With your pet, offer pre-killed mice. When feeding your boa, always make sure the prey is appropriately sized. Don't try to feed them something too big. It can cause stress and digestive problems. For most of you, that means sticking to small to medium-sized rodents and chicks. Keep feeding sessions to once a week and don't be tempted to overfeed them. Overfeeding is one of the quickest ways to cause obesity and health issues, so moderation is key. Also, always make sure the food is thawed before offering it. Trust me, you don't want to deal with the awkward moment when your boa refuses frozen food. Here's a question I'm sure you've had. How much lighting do they need? The short answer: not much. Emerald Tree Boas come from shaded rainforest canopies, so they don't need the bright, intense lighting that some other reptiles require. Low-level UVB lighting is enough to keep your boa healthy and happy, but don't overdo it with the lights. The key is providing just enough light without stressing them out. You'll also want to set the lighting on a natural day-night cycle to help with their circadian rhythm. Too much light and your snake will start to feel stressed out. Too little, and it might not be able to metabolize properly. Here's a big one: handling. If you've been trying to bond with your Emerald Tree Boa by constantly handling it, you may have noticed that this doesn't always go over well. These snakes are pretty shy by nature and don't like being handled too much. In fact, they can get stressed out from too much interaction, which is something you definitely want to avoid. While they might seem like they're not interested in hanging out with you, the truth is that they prefer to remain hidden most of the time. It's important to respect their space and limit handling to short, calm sessions. If you've been forcing them out for photos or handling sessions, give them some time to adjust to their environment and stop pestering them every day. Remember, your snake's comfort is the most important thing. They'll trust you more if you allow them to have their own space. Now let's talk about one of the most annoying yet hilarious traits of the Emerald Tree Boa. It's escape artist skills. These little guys are notorious for finding their way out of even the most secure enclosures. No matter how tight you think you've sealed it, these sneaky snakes will somehow find a way to slither out. It's like they have a sixth sense for finding gaps. I once heard a story of an Emerald Tree Boa who managed to slip through a barely noticeable gap and ended up curled up in someone's couch cushions. Imagine that. One minute they're in their enclosure and the next you're frantically searching the house like it's a snake scavenger hunt. So if you haven't already double-checked every inch of your enclosure, it might be time to do so. These guys are basically basically the Houdinis of the snake world. You may have heard that all boas grow to be massive, but with the Emerald Tree Boa, that's not entirely true. While the females can grow up to 6 feet long, males typically stay smaller, around 4 feet. So if you're dealing with a smaller snake, don't be worried, it's totally normal. These smaller sizes make them easier to handle than some of the larger boa species, so you've got that going for you. But even with their smaller size, don't forget they still need space in their enclosure to climb and explore. And just because they're smaller doesn't mean they're any less impressive. Their vivid green coloring and climbing abilities are enough to make them stand out no matter how big they get. Emerald tree boas aren't exactly aggressive snakes. In fact, they'd rather hide than fight. When they feel threatened, they will coil up and stay completely still, blending in perfectly with the branches and leaves around them. It's almost like they've mastered the art of camouflage, turning into a green blob of stealth. If you've ever been worried that they might strike or get aggressive, just know they'd much rather hide than fight. It's their defense mechanism in action, and it's pretty darn impressive. Of course, keeping your emerald tree boa healthy is essential. Like all reptiles, they can be prone to certain health issues, especially if their environment isn't quite right. One common problem is shedding issues, especially if the humidity drops too low. Regular misting will help keep things on track and make sure they have plenty of water to drink. Respiratory issues are also something to watch out for, particularly if the humidity gets too high or too low. If you notice any wheezing or labored breathing, it's time to get them checked out by a reptile vet. While handling may be minimal, that doesn't mean your emerald tree boa doesn't need mental stimulation. These snakes are naturally curious and intelligent, so giving them a variety of branches, textures, and objects to explore will help keep them entertained. Rotate the items in their enclosure every so often to keep things interesting. A snake with a stimulating environment is a happy snake, and a happy snake is a healthy one. All right, we've covered everything you need to know to keep your emerald tree boa in tip-top shape. But before we wrap up, let's answer that mystery we talked about earlier. What's their main food source in the wild? The emerald tree boa primarily feeds on birds, making it one of the few snakes uniquely adapted to hunt in the trees. Pretty cool, right? So there you have it, your guide to keeping your emerald tree boa healthy, happy, and thriving in your care. Remember, these snakes may be shy and a little tricky to handle, but with the right setup and respect for their needs, you'll have a beautiful, rewarding pet for years to come. Next up, discover why a crested gecko drops its tail and never bother to grow it back. The reason is wild. Stick around to uncover this mind-blowing fact and other must-know secrets about crested gecko care. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment telling us about your emerald tree boa, and check out our other videos for more exotic pet tips.